Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski. Today on the podcast, we are in Georgia with a Pennsylvania runner, had a great high school career, magnificent, someone who had a giant impact on my life, pretty much taught me everything I was going to learn about running through the end of high school. Welcome today on the podcast, Jim Lambert, known as Chops. Hi, Jim.
Yeah. Hey, Matthew. Hey, what an introduction. My gosh, man.
Wow. Yeah.
Boy,
Well,
memory.
let's
Hey. Yeah.
let's tell your origin story. You were always into racing, but not necessarily on your feet. I think on wheels was your
Oh,
earliest interest in racing.
yeah. It started with older brother in there. He's into car racing and stuff. And in the backyard, we had a couple acres of apple orchard. He had bought a go-kart. We would race that go-kart all around the backyard. Then he got a motorcycle, and my buddies, you know, some of the buddies, right? Sam and Vince and those guys, they were into motorcycles. I couldn't have a motorcycle, but I would help those guys. And we would go up to Watkins Glen to the car racing.
But then your own athletic career, when, how, and where did you get into first competitive running or any athletics?
I'm thinking it was eighth grade. And I think you were on the team, eighth grade track. That's the only time you could start, unlike today where kids are starting at 4 or 5 years old. But maybe a little bit before that, I don't know if you remember the gym classes we would have.
Let me tell you what I remember.
Okay.
I was in a Catholic school to eighth grade, and I transferred
remember. Yep.
into Richland in ninth grade. And I remember the track class. They took the whole bunch of us out there in whatever crappy tennis shoes we had, white gym shorts on a gravel track, and they had the whole class run a 440.
Yep.
Somehow they divided the class into 4 groups to do it. And one person in each group won clear and ahead. It was John Miller, the football fullback, who was a monster.
Yeah.
Jim Ryan, Mike Ryan. Yeah, Mike Ryan, you and I, we each won our section. And they said each of our times was 63 seconds. And I remember begging, let us have a runoff. We just got 6 more people who can run. Let's see what we do when we run. And they wouldn't let us do it. That's all I remember. And that for me was the first time in school. I said, I can run around the track as fast as anybody in the class.
Yeah, you were a much better memory of that stuff. I just remember gym class, and I remember running the lap, the 440. I do remember a couple times beating all the athletes that were in the football and all that. The athletic crowd. I was not in the athletic crowd, but then that started to change because
we met each other in ninth grade.
Yeah, double class. We were in the big double class on, I don't know, the Bolshevik Revolution or something like that. I don't remember that or not.
Yeah, it was 2 history teachers together. And I got, Mr. Mock was one of them. And I got in all kind of trouble because I defied him. He said it took a 2/3 vote of Congress to pass a bill. And I said, no, it takes a 2/3 vote to override a veto. And he said, no, you're a kid. Shut up. It's 2/3 to pass a vote. And I said, then why would it be 2/3 to pass a veto? He just said, shut up and sit down and let's move on with the class. So I remember being that kind of personality. But I met you, and you had in ninth grade, it was Richland Junior High School.
Yeah.
There was a high school less than a quarter mile away. And you had in ninth grade, I think you were the only person, you had joined the high school cross country team.
Yeah.
How was your season in ninth grade?
Oh, gee. I do remember that I was good enough to letter. Right. So I got a varsity letter in ninth grade. Only in our graduating class of 76, I think there were only a couple that got that.
There might have been a swimmer or two.
I remember that. And that's about all I remember.
All right, I'll refresh your memory because this will make you at least laugh if you don't remember.
Okay, good. Oh, I'm glad you got the call.
Our coach that season was our coach in our sophomore year, Norman Bender.
Norm Bender. Yes.
Do you remember anything about his coaching ability or style?
Oh, right.
No,
No.
really? Okay. He was a driver's ed coach, but
Yes,
he knew.
I remember that. Yeah. Yeah.
He did know something about running and coaching and training. He was a bit of a hard ass, but I thought, wow, when I first joined, I thought he knows something. I'm going to learn something. We're talking 1972, 73. What was your awareness of the bigger world of running and the sport? You had some good shoes. You had proper running shoes, I remember soon after that. You subscribed to Runner's World. You opened my eyes to all these things that I was unaware of completely.
Interesting. I got interested in running watching distinctly remember the 1968 Olympics, Mexico City Olympics. I thought that was pretty neat. And then I guess I would, run in the woods a lot because we were up against where there were like 10 acres of woods or something behind our house that connected a bunch of neighborhoods. I don't remember about the runner's world. I don't know.
What I remember is you were subscribing when they had that lifetime offer. I don't know that you took it. There was no way I had $100 to my name, so
Yeah.
it wasn't an option to me, but I remember you telling me there is a offer that you can get a Runner's World subscription for life for $100, and it's turned out I've found people that did subscribe in the '70s, and they're still getting it today. It's a different magazine. Do you remember anything about ninth grade track?
Yeah. I do remember some about that. I know at one point I tried to do some hurdling. What I remember is the longest distance that was available during track season was the 880. Okay. For whatever reason, I started running the 880. At the end of the season, we went to the Somerset Invitational. I guess I won or placed in a few of the events, and I ended up getting the male athlete trophy, like best performing male athlete. And I still have that trophy. That's what I remember.
Okay, let me tell you what I remember because this was much more this is vivid to me. You at some point were running the 440 and the 880 in a meet,
Okay.
and I ran the mile, and I set a school record, and you set school records, and the two of us were scoring a lot of points. We had a couple sprinters, and I lost. I lost a race, the last race of the year. The kid from Indiana, Mark Pellman, ran 5 minutes flat, and I was a half a second behind. Okay.
Uh, mm,
I also remember we had a race at Winburn School. My ninth grade year, I ran under 450 because the track was short. You remember they had a track that wasn't exactly the right distance, and we just ran the race. They put the times in the paper knowing it was about 15, 18 yards short per lap.
It was at the football stadium, and that was a
Yep.
track that they used for dirt track racing for cars and motorcycles. Yeah.
In the earliest days of those '70s when we started racing, the facilities were a mess. Our
Oh,
track was a gravel track. The shoes we had, we did get spikes as we moved on to high school, and we'll talk about that next. But you were very successful, outstanding performer at a track meet in ninth grade. We had those races, and I just remember being very excited to go to high school. I knew nothing about cross country. I remember reading about it as a kid in a reading
mm.
assignment and saying, I don't understand how someone could run across the country. And what are your memories of high school track? I'll fill in the details and see what you remember because it is vivid to me. But what are your memories of sophomore and then junior year of high school cross country and track?
I guess going back a little bit, after eighth grade track, I wanted to participate or do something that would keep me in shape for ninth grade track. At the end of eighth grade, I remember going to the football meeting. Like, I had this crazy idea that I was going to join the football team. I have no idea. And I think I was getting, he's not going to survive football for different reasons. And then that's when somebody mentioned at some point about cross country. And not knowing much about it, but the way it was described, it was like running through fields and woods. And I was like, oh, that's what I like to do. Okay, so that's that. And then into ninth grade, yeah, 10th grade, yeah, just I remember some of the older guys, the seniors, on been on the team, and we did a lot of training together, of course. And I guess I don't remember much about 10th grade, but 11th grade, I remember we had a good year. But I do remember that toward the end of the season, you were doing a lot better than I was. I don't know.
Any idea why?
When I was sitting at one of the football games, and all of a sudden this girl started putting her arm around me. Okay. And that was a real surprise to me. And then we started, that's the first time I ever had a girlfriend. Maybe that was the reason. I don't know. Maybe you can.
What was her name?
Oh, here. I do remember her name, Sue Costanza.
Okay.
She was a senior and I was a junior. So I think that may have had something to do with it. I had a distraction.
Let me tell you a couple things in 10th grade that I remember. See if you
Oh, 10th grade. Yeah, that's a little more vague.
okay. Our coach was Norman Bender,
Yeah.
proper coach, bit of a hard guy. Don Molnar was a year
Don
older
Molnar.
than you and I. The very first meet, the three of us won, held hands, and finished across the line
Oh,
together.
really? No kidding.
And a couple meets later, we were already taking it less than serious. And you, I, and Don Molnar took our white shorts. We ran in white shirts, white shorts, and we took food coloring and put polka dots on them. And we thought would be really funny. We won the race, and Coach Bender had no time for us, and he made us run the course 2 more times after the meet as punishment for. Do you remember any of that?
But the members.
All right, I'm not making it up. Anyhow, we were a goofy bunch of kids. We were
Yeah.
winning races. We won a lot of the meets. We did well in the conference. We did well at districts. Do you remember anything about districts the first 2 years? Because your senior year was a whole different game.
Yeah, I didn't remember we did well.
At the District 6 meet, which was at State College when we were in Class B, so we didn't have to run against Dave Valise and Marty Mango. I finished on your hip. You were third and I was fourth, and we did really well in districts. I think we won the meet.
Uh-huh.
Our junior year is when I was doing a bit better. I think you had given me a pair of good shoes, a Nitsa Tiger. You would give me your hand-me-down shoes. Do you remember? I would get shoe goo from you. I'd get your old
Do I
shoes.
remember? Yeah.
Yeah. But my memory is you knew what was going on. You had Runner's World. You'd read it, give it to me. You'd wear out your shoes, give them to me. I had nothing. I had no money, but we were good as the two of us were ahead of the pack of the rest of the team. Occasionally with Don Molnar, we could get 1, 2, 3, and that's when we would win the meet. If we would get 1, 2, 3, we would win, which is guaranteed win. If one of us didn't finish in the top 3, our team was at risk of losing. We didn't have a really strong team. In the beginning of our junior year, a significant thing happened. I don't know how you recall it. Norman Bender, the driver's ed teacher and coach, put up a ultimatum. I don't know how much he was getting paid, $100 a year or something. Or he said, I need a raise. This is a proper team. And they called his bluff and dropped him. And we did not have a coach. Do you remember anything about that?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that. Yeah. Norm wasn't the coach anymore. But I thought there was a guy, Strazik or something.
It was Dan Seachak,
Nancy.
baseball
Yeah.
player in the elementary school. They called us together about 7:30 in the morning. They called the team and said, we got some news. Your coach has resigned. We're going to try so you can have a team. And we're thought, oh man, you cannot let this team go. Get anybody. We don't need a coach. Just get somebody to show up and say they're the coach. We'll coach ourselves. My memory of our junior year was you were the coach. As far as I was concerned, you would just say, let's run this. Or not. I was learning things. Say, okay, let's run this. And We had fun. It felt like a ragtag team, but we were even better. We lost the district meet by a couple points. I got second and Don Molnar got seventh. And we really didn't have too much support after that. I remember a lot of this stuff made a big impression on me. Our sophomore year, going to the state cross country meet, in which we didn't do especially well. For me, it was a mind blowing experience
Yeah.
running a couple hundred people. But I did know I was in the 50s or something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember Coach Bender just saying, okay, here we go. And he looked at you and I and he said, today you guys just run this race, whatever happens. Next year, you're both going to be in the top 30. And your senior year, you will be 1-2 in the state. And I remember that because I said, oh, he's not. We're little runners over here in Western Pennsylvania. And what ended up happening is that prophecy came true, except for me letting them down because you did finish second in the state your senior year.
And
And
the next year, you just sent that clipping out from our junior year. I remember you were 16th. You
yeah,
got a medal.
yeah, I did. I get a state
And I was
medal.
like, wow, I'm going to train really hard because I want to get a medal at the state meet too.
My life fell apart. I didn't have a good life year that next
Yeah, I
year.
know.
My running went off tank. But a lot of it was your
I know.
friendship, relationship with you and the team and track. That really held my life together. So I'm happy with how it all came up. You got a medal at the state your junior year in
But-
track.
Oh, in track. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did.
So by then, let me say, that was after 1972. That was after Dave Waddle, and you had a style. Okay, so what do you remember about
I
that?
had a stupid Congo hat, like a beret hat. And I just saw a picture. Maybe it was a picture you sent. I don't know. You can see my hat in the back. Oh my gosh. And then I just saw that I just sent you a picture, right? You were saying about that goofy hat. And I was about to say, I was usually the one wearing the goofy hat.
Okay,
Yeah,
we
Dave
went
Waddle
to-
was he was a big idol of mine. He was really hero.
you
Yeah.
constant when we were sophomores. If you ran the 2 mile, you couldn't run anything else. So a guy older than us, Don Molnar, we left him to the 2 mile. Our junior year, they opened it up. You could run any 3 events you want. You left the 2 mile to me. Mostly you left the mile to me and you stayed winning the 800 most of the time. And they gave us a track. I believe
Yeah.
that's when topped our cinder track and gave us an artificial
Yep.
black.
Yep. That's right.
Do you remember anything about the state track meet when you won your first state medal in your junior year in the half mile?
It was at Nittany Lion Stadium.
Yeah. Our first 2 years was not a great track, windy,
Yeah.
not a great surface. It was at Penn State. Yeah.
Yep. I remember that. Yeah. It was cold and windy. I remember seeing Joe Paterno on the field. He would give out medals to the sprinters. They didn't give them out to the rest of us. Anyway, I got to see, yeah, it was Joe Paterno. It was the 880. And my big competitor, right, in the 880 was John Murtha,
Right.
son of the congressman, the late congressman. So he and I would always go head to head all the time. It was a toss up on any given meet who was going to win between us. But I guess I got the better of him the junior year, but then the senior year, he taught me for the 888. That's what I remember.
In 1976 track, Murtha finished second in the state. You finished fourth. You got your second 800
Oh.
medal.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
We had moved then to
Shippensburg. Mhm.
first year on that track.
Yeah.
And you and I were on a relay team. And
Yeah.
somehow
That was our big thing. We had that relay. I don't know when we started. I'm sure we ran in junior year. I'm sure we ran the 2 mile relay together all the time.
we
but
did
I
run
don't
it
remember.
state. I would run the 2 mile relay and then the mile and then the 2 mile. So that was my
Yeah.
big workout of the week was every Tuesday and Thursday running.
Yeah.
That was my mileage. But we would run it at big meets. We would run it at relay meets.
Yeah.
What I remember also is our coach, Fred Yanity.
Yes.
He picked us out in the winter and said, okay, we're going to go for it with the 2 mile relay. But he took us to a couple early kind of preseason invitationals. And we were running against the big schools and we were saying, all right, you and I can run fair enough close to 2 minutes. We need two more runners. We could
Yeah.
have a great relay team if we can
Yeah.
just get people to finish a 4:10 or 4:15 mile. We'll take it from there. I don't know if we ever lost a 2 mile relay. We didn't run it together that much, but it was a great experience all the way
Yeah.
through. But we rarely ran it with our four best people because you and I were busy running several events
Yeah.
at
And,
each meet.
and a lot of times I would lead off the mile relay, whatever reason.
Do you remember any injuries throughout that time or anything else that you had?
I was pretty lucky in cross country. I remember, I think it was the Forest Hills meet, and it had a messy, hilly section, and I fell and I finished, and there was blood running down my leg. But I don't think it was it was just more superficial. I think that, and we would play basketball together,
Oh, yeah.
church basketball league, and that's where I would get most of my injuries.
And I got thrown into the wall a couple times. I was a mouthy basketball player,
I,
but
I
we
probably had,
were,
I probably had a sprained ankle from playing church basketball, but no,
yeah.
I was pretty lucky when you think about it.
Let's recap your senior year. I may remember this better than you do. In your senior year in cross country, before the state meet, you lost one race. John Molnar beat you. Do you remember losing a race that year?
I remember John Molnar, Don's younger brother.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
changed schools.
Yeah, he was at the Votech.
I remember the headline when you got second in the state said, "This is the second race that Lambert lost this year." And I went back and said, "That's right." Because the junior year, I'd set a bunch of course records,
Yeah.
and you set a bunch of course records our senior year. I definitely didn't beat you. We may have tied a couple times, but you were pretty much undefeated except for one race. And then do you recall the state meet? Again, it
Yes.
may have been a new course.
Yeah, I remember the state meet. I actually remember the start in the first half mile where you're just it's like those big events they have now, the big marathons. You're just in a sea of humanity moving along and trying to avoid running into trees and stuff along the side. And I just remember trying to tuck in and stay safe for the first, whatever, half mile or something. But then I do. And then it was on a golf course and pretty hilly, as I remember. I remember going through the mile mark and the 2 mile mark. I remember something like, I don't know, 450 for the mile or something, and then 850,
950, yeah.
950. I guess that's what it was. It would have been 950 for the 2 mile. And then but the last mile, dang, there were a bunch of hills. And I remember catching one guy. I honestly didn't know where my place. And then all of a sudden I could see a guy on up ahead. And we had a long, I don't know how long, maybe the last half mile was flat. I don't remember. But I just remember, man, I was able to really crank up the speed, and I was closing on that guy, but he was too far ahead. That was Cliff Weimer. And then he was the winner, and I was second. And the guy that I passed there to get second, I remember after the race, he was devastated. I felt bad. I don't know if he had great hopes of being right up there, but I just remember him like sobbing and crying. He was,
I
anyway.
think it was because you passed him. I'm sorry to
Yeah,
tell you
well,
this. I was talking to him, and he was
Oh, so
devastated to
you
get
remember?
passed at the end.
You remember this? Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Okay, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it was a heartbreak for me. If the coach hadn't quit, I think there was maybe a chance we would have gone 1-2. I might have been able to keep up, but there was all that stuff going on. My junior year, when I look at the times, I realized I was about 9 seconds from sixth place. It was very small gaps, and
yeah.
I wasn't especially a great kicker at 3 miles. I was a miler, so I had some speed compared to some of those guys, but I wasn't a superior last 50-meter kicker. But there was a guy a couple seconds behind me, same thing. He was ecstatic where he had finished in the top 20.
Mm,
Then the next year, having done that cross country, second in the state, And then we got a second in the 2 mile relay. You got another medal. And so you were the first that I could ever remember in the history of the school. You were voted outstanding athlete in the school.
Yeah, and I came across that here not too long ago in the house, some plaque or something. And what Fred Yanady or one of them said it was the first time that a non-stickball athlete had ever gotten that. Yeah.
Yeah. Football,
Or
basketball, baseball was the rule in those days. Yeah.
yeah.
Do you have
Kevin,
any idea how much mileage we were training through any of this?
that I don't think it was very much
It
compared
couldn't
to
have been
what
20, it could 20, 25 miles a week.
I look at that now, and then later in life, I ended up coaching youth track and cross country, mostly when my kids got to that age, and I went and got certified level 2 for endurance at USA Track and Field, and I look at the mileage, I look at the training, and I look back and, dang, if we had better training, it would have been really we did amazing how well we did with no real training. Now, my senior year, I went to a thing called Gold Medal Camp run by the Allegheny Community College staff that had a pretty good runner. And that was in August. And I remember for a week, the goal was to run 100 miles in 1 week, which I did not achieve.
We
At
did
first.
that after our senior year
And then,
together.
and then I went a second time after senior year before starting college. And you were with me, right? Yeah. That time, I think I actually got to 100 miles, but the first time, which was between junior and senior year, I couldn't do it. Probably, I had a bit of a overuse injury looking back during that week because I couldn't. We would go and run a half marathon in the afternoon for training during that week. But
Yeah,
then the rest of the time, that was it. The rest of the time, we did hardly anything.
I did some logging, and for me, maybe warm up and then run a 3 mile course and warm down. So you get 4 miles in on a race day at cross country. But in track, with the warm ups, I would run half mile, mile, 2 mile. I would run 3.5 mile races and was warm up one down. That was by far the longest distance day of the year. Every Tuesday and Thursday, that was
Yeah.
my training, was actually putting in all those races. At that camp, do you remember a young girl who would go on to be a pretty good national caliber competitor, Tara Arnold? There were a couple other good people. I don't remember the coach, but it was an eye opener that some of those people could do all that training and make 100 miles in a week and not be just dead tired and limping the whole week. So that was the
Yeah.
changing of the style. That was 1970s.
Yeah.
And the bigger world of running was embracing road running. The world
Yeah.
was getting into it. How did you select college? What happened with your college running?
I went to UPJ. It was right across the street. Their coach Kelly would come and hang out, would come watch us run, and UPJ guys would train on our high school track, right? And I had got to know Coach Kelly, and he talked me into, along with other things, going there. I know the Edinburgh coach had talked to me, and then I was trying to get in the Air Force Academy, and I didn't get in. I wanted to go into engineering, and Edinburgh didn't have that. Then when I started, Coach Kelly resigned. It seems like we have a habit of having coaches resign. And they brought in the coach from Gateway High School near Pittsburgh. He came and coached UPJ for 2 years. And my college career never really materialized the way I thought it would. And I know you and I would come across each other, and you were doing really well. It seemed like to me anyway, you were doing really well in college, and I was like happy for you. It just, I was a bit envious that he's over at Indiana and he got all kinds of stuff. You just never seemed to have much of a, I don't know. It was a weird program.
But they had one stud runner,
Oh yeah.
and we got to know him when we were in high school. I was trying to talk him into running one of the mile races that I would run in high school. I said, "Run it in lane 5 and pace me so I can get under 4:30 because I don't know how to do this." So he was your roommate, right?
Steve Littleton. Yeah, and by some bizarre thing, me as a freshman had Steve Littleton, right, the All-American runner, senior, as my roommate. It was, yeah, it was a classic roommate, a bit of a contentious roommate relationship there. But anyway, we made it through. You must be taking the Riva or something. Your memory is something else, man.
I believe that because I had a quite traumatic end to my running career, I think that condensed the things I think about as running. Basically, by the time I was 19, I was done. I was
Yeah,
told, "Do not
yeah,
run again." That kinda made some of that stuff more intense
yeah.
for me.
Mine just faded out. And then, yeah, it's, yeah. I
Well,
always
but how
wonder,
did
if I'd gone to Edinburgh, would it have been a different story? My sophomore year there at UPJ was a bit of a change because we had Henry Winger came and he and I would train and he was great. We got to be buds and I went to his wedding. He lived right up the street there on Bedford Street. And we did all kinds of things together. That was a bit of a thing was there for the sophomore year, but then it just all started. Like, it seemed a bit like, I don't know. I started getting into partying and I lost interest.
it would have been interesting because certainly some of the great runners of that era, Edinburgh was national champions for a couple of years,
Yeah.
and Henry Winger was part of that team. When he came to UPJ, he set the district record at the UPJ course and was All-American.
Yeah.
Also, he was All-American at Edinburgh a couple times and he came to
Yeah.
UPJ and came in. So you moved on. You've done interesting things in your life. You went into the Peace Corps.
Yeah. 1987. I saw an article in a airplane magazine that they were looking for engineers, more technical people, something like that. I said, oh, that'd be neat. A year later, I was in the Peace Corps in Guatemala. Did that for a couple years. I actually ran a little bit down there. I ran a half marathon. That's the last time I've ever run it. Was in Coban, Guatemala.
Well, we weren't in touch for a while. I don't know if you remember, you showed up at my apartment in Harrisburg on your way. You didn't need it, but I wrote one of the recommendation letters for
Oh,
you in the Peace Corps, and you
okay.
showed up and took my car.
Thank you very much, by the
I
way.
was leaving the country and I just said, "Okay, here, drive my car and drop it off in Pittsburgh when you're done with it." And that was the last I saw of you.
Yeah, I remember driving your car. What I remember, I drove it from Florida up to your buddy in Pittsburgh, your
Yeah.
college buddy. What's his name?
Eric Romilly.
Yeah, Eric Rama. I remember driving it, and it was around New Year's, and I think it was New Year's Eve, and the water pump gave out. I spent New Year's Eve at a rest stop in one of the Carolinas and had to wait a couple days because there was nobody was open, right, to fix that car. I got your car fixed, and I brought up, oh, that was funny. What year would
Yeah,
that?
it was the end of 1989.
Oh,
I moved to
okay.
Egypt the 22nd of December.
Yeah.
Eric drove that car till they dragged it away with a chain. You came back from Guatemala and at some point got married, started a family, and then what was your transition back into coaching? And how was your style as coaching? And what was
Oh,
that experience of
yeah.
running, losing interest, and getting it back?
I started trying to get back into shape when the kids were infant. I was big. I had put on a lot of weight. And I was like, dang, I used to be skinny as a rail and run fast. I got to get back into shape. And then we were in Cincinnati for a while. I tried to run a little bit there and I came down here to Atlanta area. Joined a gym. I started doing the stationary bike and it just got in a routine of doing a consistent workout, building up, and then started to do a little bit of running. I was able to do 5Ks and stuff like that. Just pretty easy. I got into bicycling too. I really like bicycling. I still do that. I pretty much don't run, but bicycle. Anyway, all that progressed. I'd wanted to always do a triathlon, so I did a couple of sprint triathlons. That took a lot of time in the gym to get my swimming routine down because I never really learned to swim. And so that was a big focus for a number of years as the kids were growing up. And then my one daughter was really taken an interest in different sports. And she was just running, and she was actually doing like roller hockey and all kinds of different things. I don't know if she was inspired by me knowing that my dad was a runner. There was a youth cross country team that started in middle school. She joined out with some friends, and I started helping out. And then the coach there realized I had been really into running for years and years. And before I know it, he's saying, "Hey, you want to take over the team?" Within a matter of months, all of a sudden I went from just being a bystander dad to all of a sudden, "Hey, get your USATF license and we'll switch everything over." We did 4 years, and it was tough at the beginning having to just deal with a lot of different, I guess more so with the parents than anything. But because I did track and cross country, I coached. So it was a continuous thing all through the year. I don't know if you've been involved or looked at any of that youth running stuff. It's continuous, right? There's nonstop. There's not a down part of the year almost. So did that 4 or 5 years, and with a lot of effort and a lot of help from Adina. And I got to really like it, really into it. We were generally pretty successful. The kids seemed to respond and respect me after a while. And yeah, that was a pretty fulfilling thing after a few years. But then it just got to be so time consuming and time consuming away from family. Initially, it was all about being together. And at one point, it was a whole family thing, right? Both daughters and wife and I, we were all involved with the team. It was our thing for a few years. And then as they progressed into this was middle school, youth track, cross country. And as they progressed into high school, I ended up being what do they call that? The support club. What is it? I can't remember. It's escaping me. But I was the president of the booster club. That's what it is.
Oh
The
my
booster
gosh.
club. So we're the ones that kind of have to do everything with the meets and support the coaches. That all evolved like for years and years. I was doing all that stuff. And it was very fulfilling. But again, it just got to be a bit too much time away. One of the things we started that was more in high school booster club, we started our first color run, right? Where you come and you throw the cornstarch, the colored cornstarch. And it was a fundraiser. And we had a course through the woods. And anyway, that's when I did the coach training was pretty sparse. And I kept searching for more and more training. Finally, I ended up the USATF, USA Track and Field had an endurance, the level 2, which is a full week training, constant, full time for 70 hours of training at Georgia Tech in downtown Atlanta. I signed up for that and I got in, and that was really interesting. And what was interesting, there was a guest speaker coach that week, Joe Vigil. If you know who Joe Vigil is, Vigil, he was the legendary coach at the Colorado team that would beat Edinburgh, or Edinburgh beat them. He went on to be an Olympic endurance coach and coached the London English female marathoner. Yeah, Joe Vigil, Vigil. He was quite a but he was a top level coach, and particularly back. I remember saying, "Hey, I used to I trained with one of the guys from Edinburgh," and he was like, "Oh, Edinburgh, yeah, we beat them." That's cool. He convinced the Olympic committee to have a training center there. It's a little college up in the mountains in Colorado.
Yeah, he's a legend coach. Yes. Let me ask you then about your personal psyche through this until running came up. You weren't a competitive athlete. You became really successful, finishing second in the state and a couple medals on the track. If you hadn't been pursuing the Air Force Academy, it seems like a lot more colleges would have recruited you and you would have been open to that if you weren't pursuing the Air Force Academy. How much a part of your self descriptive image was runner and how much of it was student? Because you were a very good student and you were analytical and you're bound to be an engineer from your motor craft tinkering to the way you think. You're a born engineer. But how much of your image was that and how much was running, do you think?
To me, there were a lot of parallels between running and car racing. So I would think, I get on the track or the course or whatever, and then pretend I'm in a car race and then like draft behind a guy and then I'll pass the race. Yeah, I don't know. I gotta, that's a good question you're asking me there. I was like tinkering with stuff and it's funny. I came across in my old report card. There was a point there where my grades were pretty bad, like fourth or fifth grade or something like that, and in science and math. But then later, somehow it started to click. I don't know. I guess there was always a motivation to go fast, right? Maybe that, yeah. And running provided that somehow. Looking back too, with having done formal coach training and stuff, and I look back and like we were talking about, dang, we hardly did any training. But going back to when I was growing up, we had the woods and I would run through there. We would do games and chase stuff. And I was always climbing trees. One of the things I realized coaching youth kids is a lot of them have very poor hip strength, glute strength, and flexibility. And I'm thinking maybe it's for me being able to climb trees somehow gave me squatting strength and flexibility. I don't know. I meandered here, Matt. No. The other thing was wearing crappy shoes. I think that was really important to wear crappy shoes. Like then the whole barefoot running thing. You realize if you grow up and you develop that incredible foot strength and be able to, they call it equine, right? Be able to toe lift and run on your toes. You can't just all of a sudden start that. That takes years and years.
Yeah, I always ran on my toes, and later on, people say, "The rest of your foot never hits the ground." Yeah, yeah, it was something that no coaching, bad shoes can create a good environment for certain people. Yeah. What about that transition then back of I'm not in shape to being
Yeah.
a coach, having to deal with competition and winning and losing? How about all that mindset journey?
Yeah. Clearly, I wasn't happy with my physical condition, not being able to do stuff. That I distinctly remember this when the kids were real little and you weren't asleep and I was doing a lot of travel. I was 10, 220, something like that. Yeah. And then I just needed to progress toward being able to run around the block and do that. I really had no intention of getting into coaching. It all happened because of my kids. And it after a little bit of a rocky start, it started to feel pretty natural. I think going back to all those years, running was pretty natural for us. And I guess we were exposed to it, right? You know what I mean? It's like the riding the bicycles syndrome. Gee, oh yeah, back in the, gee, that's right. In the 70s, we spent a good decade of our growing life doing nothing focused on running. It was like, it was there, right? It was an inherent thing.
Taking a view of competition as a coach.
As a coach, and I would see this a lot with the other things going on around the schools with the coaches. There was a way too much emphasis on competition and winning was. So I really wanted to have them focus on what they were achieving, the process of learning to train, learning to listen to their body and respond to that because that's a whole other subject of kids just doing too much and getting injured. But I really wanted them to focus on the process of training and then the meets would competition will become more natural, I guess. The idea was we're just going to run a race, the prep the night before, the meat, the eating. It's really tough for preteens to get into that routine. And I tried to just make that this is what we're going to do for practice every day. And then when you get to the meet, it's just we're doing the same thing. We're doing the same thing, trying to ease that because a lot of them would get really freaked out at competition
Mhm.
mentally. Yeah. But that, there's so much. I learned a lot about sports psychology when you're coaching these kids. But yeah, Matt, I probably digressed off what you were asking.
But it's interesting, but for me, it's definitely at some races, some parts of some seasons, I got the best out of myself, but definitely with coaching, Who knows how a difference, or if we would have been driven too hard, who knows? It's all just the way it works. Another thing that's happened, I've had a few people on here who have had the effects of a lifetime of overtraining and not taking a break. You did take a break, but had trained very hard on the bicycle. And AFib is not an uncommon symptom for several people of our generation who trained hard in the 70s.
I have it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that you're right. I've had a few things there. I'm gonna start with my big one, which was a aortic dissection in 2016. Well, 2013, that's 10 years ago now. I started getting a lot of rapid heartbeat to the point where it was making me dizzy and lightheaded. It was very tough to diagnose because it wouldn't last very long. And they have to get that signature EKG on you. Now they got these things. I got it sitting here, this Cardia thing, which you just put your fingers on it in your iPhone. It'll give you a doctor level EKG. Back then, but in 2013, I went a couple times to them so that they could try to get a trace on me while it was happening. And finally, it was actually not a fib, it was a flutter, atrial flutter,
A bit less serious.
but more symptomatic because it was actually making me lightheaded. I found this cardiologist, electrophysiologist, EP here in Atlanta that was really top guy. He diagnosed it from the couple very short traces that they were able to get of me during an episode. He said an ablation would probably really help. That a flutter is in the right atrium. And he goes, that is very easy to access. And I think you could really benefit from it. So I had it done, and that's been 10 years. I haven't had any of that. But then 2 years later, in 2015, as I was starting to get checked out a bit more for this stuff, I started having a fib. But I don't remember having, other than you could feel your heart going, I don't remember having any symptom of it. I think with AFib, it's more serious because you're at a high risk of a stroke. Yeah. I went back to the same guy and he checked me out and he said, yeah, you got AFib. Yeah, your flutter is gone, right? But your AFib, which is the other chamber. And so I had that ablation called the PVI, pulmonary vein isolation. It was done with cryo surgery in 2015, and I haven't had a problem since. My big event was 2016, where I got really stressed out at work and I blew out my aorta. I had an aortic dissection, which is delamination, and had emergency open heart surgery to replace my aorta. And yeah, so I have a plastic aorta, a few inches long, Dacron.
Okay.
There's a history of that stuff in my family, but I know over the years, you hear these reports of these top athletes and stuff like that suffering from those things. So I don't know, is it chicken and the egg? Which is it from the training or is it hereditary? I don't know.
And did the training and fitness accumulated over life help you have good outcomes?
The thoracic surgeon, right? The one that does open heart surgery, that lady, she was amazing. And she goes, you're my rock star. That was 2016. So 7 years ago, which I would have been 58. She goes, we worked through your surgery and these things can take all different paths as they get into somebody. And we hit every step along the way. You were right on whatever, not needing anything special. It was like by the book. And it was the first one that she had done hundreds of these things. And she was amazed. And at the time, I was in pretty good shape.
All of the stuff was in the right place.
Yeah, my stuff was in the right place. I was recovering. I didn't have some weird thing going one way or the other. I don't know all the stuff. Just imagine all the stuff that can go wrong. And I really think it was because at the time, I think I was bicycling. I had gotten back into shape. And if that had happened when I was out of shape and overweight, I don't know. It might have been a different outcome. So,
Did you do high intensity training when you were biking?
Yeah, I would do these 100-mile bikes up in the North Georgia mountains, up the climbs that Lance Armstrong would do and stuff like that. And they had a pro bike race up here in Georgia, toward Georgia for years, and I would go up there and ride. At the time, power meters, they were too expensive, but I would do my own thing where there was like a 2-mile hitch of 10%. I knew my weight, I knew my speed. I could estimate my wattage. I was a couple hundred watts for that period of time. So I was really into all that biometric stuff as best I could without spending exorbitant money on power meters in your bicycle. I never had VO2 max training other than stuff that the one they'll do at the gym where they'll put you on it's an estimate of VO2 max, which always came out pretty good. But as far as VO2 max training, yeah, oh yeah, I love doing VO2 max training. That's the only time I could feel like I was running fast. That feeling when you're going fast, man, that feeling, right? You're going fast, you feel like you're flying. And I don't get that anymore. So running, obviously, but the bicycling, when my wife, everybody thinks I'm crazy sometimes. I would just love climbing a long, steady climb up in the mountains because it gave me that. I love that feeling of getting my heart rate up in the 160s.
Yeah, I think there's an addiction to that and an addiction of feeling not necessarily alive, but pushing your body to what it was meant to
Exactly.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great thing. Henry Winger had a pacemaker.
Henry Winger.
They used to take pulse at Edinburgh during the training, make sure they were training hard enough, making sure they're recovering. But Henry had this pacemaker.
All right. I remember, and we trained solidly there for a year, and we got to be buds, and I knew his girlfriend, wife to be. But I remember this now that he said he had some kind of heart condition, and that was one of the reasons he was training so hard because he didn't want to have, I don't know, whatever his dad had or his uncle. Something.
Let's go back full circle. The running career has ended. The coaching career has ended. What about you as a fan of track and field and a fan of motor racing?
I watch motor racing, the Formula One mostly. Got the Las Vegas Grand Prix coming up, so that'll be interesting. I still record track and field meet and watch those. It's funny, my wife is probably more the runner now than I am. She likes to go do these 5Ks and stuff. I was like, I don't know. I can't. I guess I could walk them or jog a little bit. I don't know.
Okay,
But
I've done a lot more talking this episode than I usually do. It's very fun to me to reflect on all this because of our overlapping lives. That in the 1970s, I was also on the basketball team, although it was practice meet. We had a really great
yeah,
basketball team, went to the state finals. But
yeah,
the running community and our friendship, our track team for several years, maybe because we had success in our corner of the state, made it even more fun, but it was my world. My worldview was tiny. I didn't have a
yeah.
lot of resources as a kid, so it was my world, and the friendships that we form under those teams just made it worth everything to me. It was just a great experience. My personal lives and the various things that happened, I think I've had a great charmed life in all, and everything's worked out great for me. But some of the challenges that were there just were very overcomable because of the support of having a team and having running in my life. That's how I view it.
Yeah, I remember you living with us, right?
To put this in perspective, I think you saved my life. In fact,
Yeah.
with your support, with your family support, with the fun and attitude to running. I know that we competed with each other in such a healthy way. I remember in ninth grade track, I set the school record in the mile, and I was getting a lot of attention in the school. And we ran a race at the end of the year, and it was the only time you ran the mile, and you had kicked me. And I remember saying, "You're better at this than I am, and I get all this attention. Thank you for letting me have the mile all year." And you're like, "Oh, sure event, my event." And I just remember that it was so great to be able to compete, to try as hard as I could. My memory of relationships with other teams was the same way. it formed for me a way to not look at competitors and rivals as anything but a chance to have a relationship with somebody else doing the same thing we were. It was really great timing.
Yeah, I remember too, and I guess as we talk, my bits and pieces will my memory come back. I remember, I guess it was our senior year, and I learned a lot from you about team relationships, teammate relationships. And I think there were times my attitude got the best of me. I don't want to say very supportive, but just had a tone of superiority. And then I just remember you and I having a discussion, and you helped me just say, look, we're a team here. You helped me have a different perspective on things. And that really carries through with me today that we're all the whole concept of team. These are individual sports. It's a team that has to pull it all together. And if you're like just a training partner or support person, or of course the relay exemplifies it, and the cross country team. I love cross country as a team, as a sport, and coaching that, you know, yeah, that it's everybody's working together. It's individual, but you're all supporting each other.
Certainly the Edinburgh guys, I talked to a lot of them.
Oh, okay.
They weren't all together for 4 years. They because of their funding and platform, the team broke up after a couple of years.
Oh,
But yeah, lifelong relationships get formed by the lonely miles on the road. And there's human interest stories here, which is really what it's about.
yeah, exactly. That's, yeah. Like I was saying, growing up, I was at the neighborhood punk kid that would never get picked for a team, and nobody wanted me on their team. And I don't know, somehow things worked out.
That's the story.
Stay focused on what I wanted to do. And there was an avenue for me to pursue that. You look at those old pictures of the cross country team. What's a bunch of ragtag thing. We had these baggy, faded. We were just a bunch of. I don't know what you want to describe it. Like,
Yeah.
who are these guys? And all of a sudden they're a team with.
Well, that's the story from last kid picked to play dodgeball to voted best athlete in the school. That's the
Well,
interesting story. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Do you remember one track meet, the way it was scored or something? You, me, and Frank Rively each won 3 events, right? And we were like, "Whoa!" The 3 of us doubled the score of it, and Fred Yannick was really not happy
Oh,
because we
really?
were like the triumvirate. We beat every other school, and he's, "Oh, so you don't need the team?" No, we're just saying our team is so good. And he was just like, and they were like, how way to spoil the moment, coach."
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well,
Right.
he would win some field events all the time. Right?
Discus javelin, and
Triple jump. Okay. Yeah.
there was a
Mm.
tragic way that states work. In our junior year, you medaled in track, and Frank Rively made the finals in 3 events: discus, javelin, and triple jump. And they took 6 people to the final, and they gave 5 medals, and he finished 6th in all 3 events.
Oh,
Poor Frank. He
yeah.
was such an amazing
He's a
athlete,
great guy. Frank's a great guy. Yeah.
specializing in competitive rifle eye care.
Oh my gosh. Really?
He was president of the Nationals Competitive Shooting Organization, and as
Really?
an eye doctor, specialized in getting people's eyes fixed for competitive shooting. You connected with that family that I met in Guatemala, Alma.
Oh yeah, I did. I did. I went to their house. I had what they call the Grand Slam there. We get giardia, dysentery, worms, and amoebas. Something like all at the same time. My worms were just small.
Yeah.
Some people had them bad. If I had giardia so many times. I knew exactly what it was.
What's going on in your daughter's lives?
Sure. Let's see. The most recent move was my older daughter moved to Boston, and she's teaching at an elementary school in Cambridge. And she was here for years teaching at elementary school and loves it. Is really good at it. They both went to the University of Georgia here, which is in Athens. That's where I live. But she just needed to get away and get to it. There was a more of a potential for a meaningful single life. She really likes Boston. So we'll see how that
Yeah.
happens over the winter. But I used to live up there in northern Boston, Beverly area. But and then the younger one, she just got a master's in mental health counseling, and she's working full time there in New York City. She's on it's a pending license. You have to wait 2 years till she gets fully licensed. But yeah, and then she's getting married next year. Her fiance is a computer science guy working for Amazon. And anyway, yeah, that's what they're doing.
So you didn't pass on any engineering genes.
I tried big time, and that was probably my mistake. I tried too hard, but anyway,
That's great.
somehow I stayed to my interests and got to be an athlete. You think about
Wow.
how things could have gone one way or the other. You never know.
Wow. The small twists and turns that could have
Yeah.
had such giant effects.
Yeah, like how I ended up just all of a sudden there happened to be a job in Boston. I went to Boston, and that set me on a path on a certain type of engineering technology that I've been doing until this year. And along the way, I met my wife, and then a kid. Oh my gosh, it's just. But I tell you, I'm hoping I really appreciate you doing this, and I'm hoping maybe I can show some of it to my family because you remember so much more about me and us. And I really enjoy.
I can remember the blue pair of shoes. I don't know if they're Adidas or they were Adidas, and you'd wear them out, hole in the toe, and then you got a better pair and you gave them to me, and I'm like, I got real running shoes. That's all I ran in. And for some people, running in the street, cars would scream at us and change the pioneering. Do you remember running from the traffic light in Westmont to Ligonier?
Yes, yes. What a crazy thing! With the advent, it was the Johnstown Marathon. There was that group of runners out of Westmont, I think, that were really instrumental in getting I don't know what, knee pain or I wasn't
Yeah.
doing that well, but I did finish. And I remember distinctly, and I tell my kids this story. I finished that run, and we're walking around the streets of Ligonier, and I was so delirious. I walked right into a light pole. I had no idea that light pole was there. I walked right into it. Another thing, I remember running a mile relay, and I remember blacking out on the finish stretch. But I kept going. And then I woke up right before the finish line. I just remember like a tunnel vision. There were no G forces going on. I remember
Just
like everything just went, and then it came back.
wow.
Oh my God, it's been great. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
I hope you have. It's been,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I like
Yeah,
talking.
you're my hero. You were a hero in my life, man.
No. Hey, I appreciate that.
Just say you're welcome.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Stay
See
hydrated.
ya.
See you later.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.